The war room was a crypt of humming monitors and scattered files, the air thick with the weight of secrets. Kash Patel leaned forward, his eyes locked on the flickering screen as the footage looped relentlessly. Jill Biden, fist clenched, face carved in determination, shouted over a crowd's forced applause. "You did it, Joe! You did it!" But Joe Biden didn't smile. He didn't wave. His gaze drifted to nowhere, a man held upright by invisible strings and a regimen of drugs that barely kept him tethered to the moment. The crowd's cheers dissolved into an uneasy silence, and in that instant, millions of Americans saw not a president, but a hollow shell, dragged across the finish line by a woman who wasn't just a wife. She was the operator. Kash whispered to Representative James Comer, his voice a blade. "If your wife has to scream like a stage mom to get you across the finish line, maybe you're not running the race." Comer's jaw tightened, his eyes glued to the screen. This wasn't a partisan jab anymore, not some Reddit thread or late-night talk radio rant. It was a national security question, gnawing at the heart of democracy. Who really ran the country? And after what they were about to uncover, sleep would elude anyone who dared to look. The footage cut to stark black and white, a montage of Biden's stumbles, slurred words, and teleprompter fumbles. Short stares rolled out to prevent another public collapse. Air Force One photos showed not the commander-in-chief, but Jill Biden in his chair, signing papers, answering calls. Nobody elected her, yet there she was. Not First Lady, but First Operator. The room grew colder as the images shifted to a sealed room under the oncology wing of a Wilmington hospital. The Wilmington Files, as Kash called them, changed everything. One patient. No visitors. Alias POTUS 112. Diagnosis: advanced prostate cancer, metastasized to the bone. Treatment: hormone therapy, known to cause severe brain fog, physical deterioration, muscle atrophy. Translation: he couldn't think, couldn't stand, couldn't serve. But Jill knew. She signed the intake forms, attended every meeting, ran the cover. The scandal wasn't that the president was sick. It was that they hid it. Worse, they used it. This wasn't care. This wasn't love. It was cold-blooded politics, a plan so simple, brutal, and efficient it could only be forged in power's shadows. Run Biden as a Trojan horse in 2024. Let him limp past the finish line. Then, when nature took its course, Kamala Harris would step into history as America's first black female president. No primaries, no debates, just a silent transition cloaked in sentimentality. A stretch? Not according to Zeke Emanuel, renowned oncologist and brother of Rahm Emanuel, Obama's former chief of staff. On live TV, he said it plainly. He didn't get this in the last 100 days. He probably had it at the start of his presidency. They all knew. Zeke knew. Jill knew. Kamala didn't ask. And somewhere in the shadows, Barack Obama smiled. Obama once mused about a third term, running things from behind the scenes with someone else taking the calls. It wasn't a joke anymore. Comer muttered, "They're running a weekend at Bernie's presidency." Kash shook his head, dry as ever. "Nah, Bernie had better posture." This wasn't a comedy or a meme war. It was real, prosecutable, a betrayal at the highest level. When you wheel out a man who belongs in hospice, when you have him sign executive orders with an autopen while his wife sits at the desk, that's not democracy. That's theater. And Jill Biden wasn't in the audience. She was directing the show. The trail began with a text, 2 words, check sublevel. Anonymous, desperate, metadata scrubbed. It was enough for Kash Patel to board a red-eye to Wilmington, Delaware. He wasn't FBI anymore, not a federal prosecutor, not on any roster. But in a post-Trump DOJ, some men still had keys to doors no one wanted opened. Sub-Level 3 of the Cancer Center was one such door. No patients listed, one locked room, no signage, no visitors. A single code on the terminal, POTUS 112. Kash pulled on gloves, his breath steady. "Let's see what you've been hiding, Jill." The records ran deep. Initial entry: January 22nd, 2021, one day after inauguration. Diagnosis: metastatic prostate cancer, bone lesions confirmed. Treatment: Degarelix, Zoladex, radiation every 10 days. Side effects: memory loss, disorientation, loss of muscle mass, severe cognitive fog. Kash didn't need a medical degree to see the match. "This isn't a medical file," he said. "It's a cheat code for breaking a presidency without anyone noticing." The kicker: the doctor in charge was Ezekiel Emanuel, Rahm's brother, Obama's health advisor, and the man who casually admitted on TV that Biden likely had cancer from the start. The digital signature glowed at the bottom of the intake form: Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel. Beneath it, Primary Family Liaison, Jill Tracy Biden. She wasn't in the dark. She was in the loop. The whistleblower met Kash in the parking garage 30 minutes later. Baseball cap, shaky hands, voice raw. He was a nurse, mid-30s, with eyes that hadn't slept in days. "They made us sign NDAs, said it was for national security." But that man wasn't a patient. He was a product. They'd wheel him in, sedate him, pump him with enough to stand for a speech, then wheel him out. Jill was there every time, signing, directing, deciding. Kash handed him a burner phone. "Subpoena's coming." The nurse nodded, his hands trembling as he slipped into the shadows. He'd risked everything: career, safety, maybe more, to get the truth out. Back in D.C., the files were decrypted, triple verified. Prescriptions linked to Biden's private pharmacy in Rehoboth Beach. Unmarked SUV deliveries, always on weekends, always after presidential rest visits. The stumbles, teleprompter meltdowns, vacant stares, they weren't random. They were recovery periods, scheduled to avoid scrutiny. And Jill? She wasn't just aware. She was operational. Her signature greenlit every hormone, every sedative, every silence. Kash stood before a whiteboard in his war room. Pinned next to the Emanuel file, he wrote in bold red letters, POTUS 112, Proxy, Jill Biden. Dr. Zeke Emanuel. Handler, unknown. He drew one more box, left blank, labeled Puppeteer. Turning to his team, he said, "She didn't just know he was sick. She signed off on keeping him that way." The question wasn't just who was writing the orders, it was who was writing the script. The folder hit James Comer's desk with a thud. Unmarked, unlabeled, but he knew who sent it. Inside, surveillance logs, pharmacy records, and a drive labeled Cabinet 2.1 Staged. The first clip showed a cabinet meeting, one the press pool wasn't allowed to film. Joe Biden sat stiffly, blinking, not leading, reading. Secretaries, advisors, agency heads, all waiting their turn, all following lines. It wasn't a discussion. It was a delivery, like a high school table read for the executive branch. Splice marks, jump cuts, audio stitching. Comer leaned back. They didn't just rehearse this. They reshot it. Another clip showed Jill whispering to Joe before a meeting. 5 seconds later, he parroted her words to Secretary Mayorkas, word for word, like a ventriloquist's dummy. The script files, marked with Rahm Emanuel's initials, tied it together. This wasn't incompetence or senility. It was a production. Biden wasn't supposed to lead. He was supposed to last, just long enough to keep Kamala Harris off the ballot and ease her into power through a scripted transition. Comer stood before the oversight team. Screenshots of Kamala lingering just out of frame in meetings, never leading, always ready. "You want to know the plan?" he said. "It's not 4 more years of Joe Biden. It's 40 years of Kamala and company if we don't blow the lid off now." Cash chimed in, "Trojan horse politics, except instead of warriors, they packed in Marxism and memory foam." The room laughed, but only for a moment. The rot was real. They didn't want a president. They wanted a placeholder. The mainstream media spun a different tale. The New York Times called Jill the quiet compass of a turbulent administration. CNN aired teary segments with grainy footage of her holding Joe's hand, cue piano, and narration. Through sickness and health, through duty and decay, Jill stood tall. But the facts screamed louder. She wasn't just by his side. She was calling the shots. A leaked Air Force One video showed her snapping at a junior aide who suggested letting staff lead more. "Lead what?" Jill's voice was calm but cold. "I'm the only one keeping him from collapsing in front of the damn world." The aide fell silent. Everyone did. This wasn't love. It was control. White House sources told Politico, anonymously, "There are 2 circles, the public one with Kamala, and the real one where Jill decides what Joe says and when. Schedules, speeches, medical disclosures, she approved them all. To the media, she was a caregiver. To those inside, she was the gatekeeper." Cash wasn't buying the sob story. "Caregivers don't sign hormone suppression therapy for executive function," he said, "unless that's a Delaware tradition I missed." Comer dropped the hammer in a committee prep session. "You don't get to wrap elder abuse in a shawl and call it compassion." Jill persisted. In a 60 Minutes segment, she said, "I did what any wife would do. I shielded the man I love. I gave this country stability when it could have crumbled." It was calculated, composed, and it worked for her supporters. Stand By Jill trended for days, but in Capitol Hill subcommittees, the truth cut deeper. The committee peeled back the layers and found not just control, but choreography. Perfect beats, perfect timing, perfect messaging. And when something's that perfect, someone's directing it. Internal memos, policy positions, talking points, all formatted identically. Initiated by OFA, Support, Organizing for Action, formerly Obama for America. Cash stared at the documents. Whoever wrote this didn't just have access to power. They'd held it. A clip from Colbert showed Obama grinning. "I'd love a 3rd term where I could sit in my basement in sweats and whisper in their ear through an earpiece." The audience laughed then. Nobody laughed now. The digital trace sealed it. Auto-pen signatures for executive orders, processed while Biden was resting in Rehoboth, linked to a software team co-founded by an Obama aide. The orders came from a private server in Northwest D.C., 5 blocks from Obama's townhouse. His old crew, Susan Rice, Dennis McDonough, appeared in memos, emails, calendar invites. It wasn't influence, it was infrastructure, a shadow staff, a post-presidential presidency. With Jill as the face, Kamala as the air, and Joe as the shell, Obama didn't need to step into the light. He already had the stage. "This isn't a 3rd term," Comer told the committee. "It's a recycled one. Same doctrine, different dummy." Cash leaned back. The Constitution says 2 terms, but no one said anything about ghostwriting the next one. The footage didn't lie. Joe Biden stood alone, or tried to, gripping lecterns, buckling knees. Jill guided him, her smile forced, her whispers constant. Debate night, her voice louder, his mumbled. Wilmington security footage showed him in a hospital gown, flanked by aides and Jill, just existing. Yet, within 48 hours, a White House video showed him jogging across the South Lawn. Different suit, different lighting, different month. The footage leaked. Encrypted forums, Fox, X, then everywhere. America watched in silence, the kind before a scream. The truth wasn't in memos or closed-door sessions anymore. It was in plain sight. But they'd told us to clap, to believe the illusion. And when we stopped, they called us cruel for noticing. The public's reaction was seismic. Protests erupted outside the White House, not with signs or slogans, but with quiet gatherings of citizens holding candles, demanding answers. Social media exploded with hashtags. Who runs America? Jill in charge, while others mourned the betrayal of trust. We voted for a man, not a mirage, one ex-post read, shared millions of times. The networks tried to spin it, but the dam had broken. The people saw the strings. The House Oversight Committee room was packed. Reporters, lawyers, staffers. America watched. Jill Biden sat in the witness chair, tailored white suit, calm, but gripping her water glass tightly. Comer adjusted his mic. Did the First Lady knowingly oversee, participate in, and benefit from concealing the president's terminal illness for political gain? Or plainly, did she run the country from his bedside? Jill leaned in. This isn't a hearing, it's a circus, and I'm not here to dance for political clowns. Cash smirked from the second row. You already did for 4 years. Laughter rippled. Kamala, seated behind Jill, tensed. This isn't about a diagnosis, she said sharply. It's about grief, care, standing by someone. Comer didn't flinch. Madame Vice President, we're not talking about emotional support animals. We're talking about constitutional fraud. The monitor flickered. Footage. Jill guiding Joe's hand to sign Executive Order 14,098. The Wilmington intake form, signed by Jill T. Biden. A memo. All cabinet responses pre-approved via script. Tell me, Dr. Biden, Comer said, how does one script compassion? Jill fired back, I protected my husband. I gave America stability. If I'd stepped back, the chaos would have been worse. Cash interjected, if by stability you mean hormone shots and autopen orders, sure. Kamala snapped, you're weaponizing illness. Cash raised an eyebrow. That's rich, coming from someone who rehearsed her acceptance speech before Biden's last debate. Comer raised a DOJ referral package. The evidence is overwhelming. Under the Elder Justice Act and civil rights provisions, this is criminal. Jill's jaw tightened. Kamala whispered, inaudible. Cash murmured to Comer, if looks could kill, we'd be in Gitmo's basement. Comer wasn't done. You said you kept Joe standing, but you kept the truth buried. We're here to dig it up. The gavel fell. Jill didn't respond. Her eyes said it all. She knew. The signatures were real, the footage authentic, the diagnosis undeniable. For 4 years, the most powerful office in the world was a puppet theater. Joe was the face, but the hand wasn't his. Behind him stood a wife who called it caregiving, a vice president who called it loyalty, and a former president who didn't need to call it anything. He never left. They told us to trust the smiles, the 1-minute clips where everything looked fine. Most of us did. But the curtain slipped, revealing not incompetence, but orchestration. A man who couldn't read briefings, a staff reading scripts, a first lady signing medical directives, a former president ghostwriting policy, and a
successor waiting for the body to drop. This wasn't about love or service, it was about control. And when control wears a wedding ring, we almost believe it. But now we know better. Jill Biden wasn't just a wife. She might have been the real president all along.